Another interesting part about the provider is we can actually provide multiple providers. In our case, we are providing this counter provider to this my homepage. And that is the only one that we are providing. But if there is any way that we can provide some values from multiple providers. For example, in our case, we are getting the value from counter provider, placing it inside of text widget. Also, I want to create another provider inside of the providers and get the value and place it inside of the first text widget right over here. For example, here we have this text widget inside of the column, and instead of this many, I want to use value that comes from separate provider. So how can I do it? Actually, that's not logical because counter value can be used also instead of this many, but for just showing you how can you use multiple providers, I will create another separate provider to provide another counter value for this text widget. Here inside of providers, I will create first count provider. Inside the first count provider, we will create first count provider that will use mixin, which is change notifier. Automatically, it is imported from material Dart. And inside of it, I will create variable again that's going to be counter first, which means that will be used inside of first text widget. Initial value will be 0. Again, we will be using a method which will increase the value of it, and I will say increase first counter. So that will be similar to this counter provider. Here we will just say counter first plus plus, and also we have to use parentheses after the method name. And here we can use notify listeners. I want to listen to this one from my home page where I can provide it. Inside of the app Dart, we are providing change notifier provider, as you see. And now also I want to provide second provider to this my homepage. What I can do in this case, I will delete this change notifier provider, or maybe we can cut it because we will need it. Here, just cut this one here. And I will be using multi-provider. And now again, we are using provider because this multi-provider comes from the provider package. And here inside of it, there is some properties. First of all, we have providers, and inside of it, we can define our providers. Firstly, I will paste the code that I deleted recently, import this from counter provider. Then we have my home page. I will import it from my home page. Currently, we used only one provider. And here we are using child property, and also inside of multi-provider, as you see, there is another child. So instead of using the child right over here, I will cut it from this part. And I will only have change notifier provider. Then inside of this multi-provider, I will paste this code. So that should be last property. That's why moving this to the last argument will solve the issue. And here inside of providers, it takes list of single child widget. We can add second one, which is first count provider. Again, change notifier provider, and create argument takes function, and we can use this syntax. And inside of it, we can return provider that we want to use. And in our case, that's going to be first count provider. Now we have multi-providers, first one, second one, inside of providers. And we have child argument, and that means we will be using this multi-providers for only one child. And now if I go to my home page, and we already provided value of this provider right over here. As you see, we are listening to the counter value from this counter provider. But also I want to listen to this first count provider. That's why what I can do, same way we can get this text and extract it. Why we are doing this? Because when we are using first count provider, I only want to build this text widget. And the first way is consumer, and the second one is extracting this. And let's name it like first counter text. Then we can create a new file inside of the widgets and name it first counter text.dart file. Then we can get this code, place it inside the first counter text, import. Also, let's use constant here. That's it. Also, from my home page, we are getting error because this first counter should be imported from first counter text. Now there is no any issue. Then, in order to increase counter value inside of this first count provider, we have to call this method. And where we can call it, inside of my home page, we are calling increase counter. Also, I want to call second increment method from first count provider. So we can say context read, and we want to use first count provider, then create the instance of it, dot increase first counter. That's it. That's gonna increase counter value, which is inside of the counter first. Then we have to consume this counter first from first counter text. So we can call context.watch, and inside of it, we can say we want to get value from first count provider. Create the instance of it. Also from the provider package, we have to import this watch. Then from this instance, we can get the counter first. I don't want to get it directly. What I can do, I can assign it to this provider. Let's say provider. Then we can get this provider. Instead of this many, I will delete this. And as a variable to use it, we have to make string interpolation. Just because we used variable, we have to delete constant. And now there is no any issue. Also, we used watch because we want to listen to the changes of this counter first. Let me restart my application. If I click to the button, as you see, using first count provider, we made this first text reactive, and using counter provider, we made second text reactive.